The New Orleans Saints just turned a 6-win season into every contender's quiet nightmare, and almost nobody outside Louisiana has figured it out yet. On paper, this is a team that finished with more losses than wins. In reality, it is a group that found a new identity on offense, discovered a quarterback who can drag them back from deep holes, and now sits in a spot where one big offseason can flip the entire NFC picture. The strange part is how normal it all looks from a distance. Same jerseys, same stadium, same fan base. But underneath the surface, the Saints are moving like a team that knows its window is opening while the rest of the league is busy staring at bigger brands and louder storylines. Look at the offense first, because that is where the shock really starts. With veterans in and out of the lineup and depth pieces all over the field, Shuck stepped in and turned desperation drives into real belief, hitting players like Chris Olave and Devon Vele one week, then guys casual fans barely recognized the next, and somehow the Saints kept finding late scores. The small details changed. Third down confidence, red zone trust. The way the huddle settled when the game tightened, and you could feel it in the crowd. They stopped hoping for a lucky break and started expecting this offense to answer when it mattered. Then you glance at the other side of the ball and realize the support system is already there. A front, led by Chase Young, started wrecking pockets. The secondary quietly produced top-tier numbers. And now the league has chosen this group to represent it in Paris in front of more than 80,000 people, which is not what you do with a team you think is stuck in neutral. Add in the chance that a playmaker like Rashid Shaheed could boomerang back to join Shuck and Chris Olave, plus the fact that other franchises are trying to hire away pieces of this coaching staff, and it starts to feel like everyone else just let the Saints rebuild a problem in plain sight. To understand how they reached this point and why the locker room trusts Shuck this much, you have to go back to the ugly part of the story when Spencer Rattler was starting. The losses were piling up, and nobody outside that building believed a real turnaround was coming. But before we get into that, hit that like and subscribe button for more Saints and all the NFL content. Can we get 200 likes on this video? At one point, the same New Orleans Saints team looked done before the season even reached the serious part, and the league had already moved on to other stories. The early weeks were rough, drives stalled, the offense felt stuck, and every close loss added a little more weight to the idea that this year was just a bridge to the future. With Spencer Rattler under center, there were flashes of talent, but not enough rhythm, not enough control. And slowly, the mood around the team shifted from hope to survival as fans started talking more about draft position than playoff paths. Inside the building, though, that was not the end of the story. It was the point where the hard conversation had to start. Coaches knew what they were asking Spencer Rattler to carry. They knew the roster was banged up, but they also knew there was another option sitting in that room, an older rookie who had seen a lot of college football and did not rattle easily. When Shuck finally got the call, it was not sold as a magic fix. It was sold as a test. Can he steady the huddle? Can he run the playbook the way it is drawn? Can he keep the ball moving when the roster around him is not close to full strength? The switch was not loud. There was no big public drama. But you could feel a different kind of focus in the way teammates talked about that change. What happened next is where the identity started to flip. With Shuck running the show, the same group that had felt heavy and flat began to play like a team that believed it always had one more answer left. The offense did not turn into a fireworks show overnight, but the late-game drives had order. The pocket presence looked calmer, and you could see veterans on the sideline nodding in a way that told you they trusted this rookie to handle real pressure. That is the part that sets up everything else, because once a locker room feels that shift at quarterback, the next question is simple and dangerous for the rest of the league. If this is what he changed just by stepping in mid-season, what does it look like when you break down exactly what Shuck did on the field, snap by snap? Once Shuck stepped in, the results stopped being theory and turned into numbers that actually moved the season. The Saints went from drifting through Sundays to stacking real wins, with Tyler Shuck guiding them to 5 wins in 9 starts and putting together 3 different fourth-quarter drives that ended with New Orleans in front. Every time he got the ball late with the game on the line, he did not flinch. He just marched the offense down the field and finished the job. And that is how you end up with a rookie who owns 5 of the team total 6 victories. This is not empty volume. It is a young quarterback changing the final score in real time, while everyone outside the city is still asking basic questions about who he is. The deeper you look, the more it becomes clear that this was not luck, it was control. Among qualifying passers, Tyler Shuck posted the highest fourth-quarter passer rating in the league at 103.3. And he sat near the very top in late-game completion rate at roughly 67%, which means the ball was safe and on time when pressure should have been at its peak. In the red zone, the shift was even louder. The Saints went from a bottom group to a unit that finished drives, jumping the touchdown rate from the high 30 range up into the low 50 range once Tyler Shuck took over. You could see it in the way play callers trusted him on third and medium, in the way receivers ran routes, knowing the ball would be where it needed to be, and in the way defenders on the sideline watched him work and believed their stops would actually lead to wins instead of close losses. Then you add the way he attacked different parts of the field in a year that was built to punish aggressive quarterbacks. Defensive coordinators across the league leaned hard into 2 high and 4 deep shells to erase explosives. Total 300-yard passing games dropped to around 68 across the whole season, yet Tyler Shuck still produced multiple 300-yard outings and ranked near the very top in that 10 to 19-yard window with strong completion rate, high yards per attempt, and positive completion over expectation. That efficient intermediate and downfield work, stacked on top of all the late-game production, is why you can honestly say he belongs in the same offensive rookie of the year conversation as players like Tedairoa McMillan, Cam Ward, and Jackson Dart without forcing it. And the scary part for the rest of the NFC is this. All of that came while he was throwing behind a banged-up line and working with a patchwork group of weapons, which is exactly where the story goes next, when you see what kind of support he actually had on offense and how the defense quietly kept the whole thing alive. The strange thing about this New Orleans Saints surge is that it did not happen with a full-strength highlight, real offense. It happened while key pieces vanished, week after week. There were long stretches without Alvin Kamara, without Kendre Miller, and even the young rookie back Devin Neal had to carry moments that were way heavier than a first-year role should be. The tight end room never gave Tyler Shuck a true every-down safety valve, and yet the chains kept moving. That is why Saints fans talk about this run with so much pride, because they know most of these drives were built with duct tape, not luxury parts. Look at the names that kept showing up on the broadcast graphic, and you understand how wild it really was. One Sunday, it is Ronnie Bell finding space on a crucial third down. Another week, Dante Pettis shakes loose down the sideline. Then you see Samurai Toure, Kevin Austin, Bub Means, Mason Tipton, Trey Palmer, and other hungry players stepping into moments that usually belong to established stars. These are not household names. They are grinders who were asked to match timing with a rookie quarterback in real game speed, and still found ways to make plays when the season looked ready to collapse. For a fan watching at home, it felt like every time you learned a new name on Sunday, Tyler Shuck was already trusting that player on Monday, which tells you everything about how quickly that offensive group bonded around the situation. While all of that chaos swirled on offense, the other side of the ball quietly held the season together. With Chase Young crashing pockets, veterans like Cam Jordan and Demario Davis setting the tone, and a secondary that spent week after week squeezing passing lanes, the Saints defense kept scores low enough for this patched-together offense to steal games late. It was not loud. There were not weekly viral clips, but the numbers kept creeping toward the top of the league in pass coverage, while the run front did just enough to force obvious throwing downs where the rush could take over. Put it all together, and you get a picture that is very different from the lazy 6-win narrative you see a roster that already has a playoff-level defense and a proof of concept around Tyler Shuck, which is exactly why the next part of this story matters so much. The money decisions, the veteran contracts, and the front office moves that will decide how far this core can really go. From the outside, the Saints cap sheet looks like a warning sign that flashes in bright red, with that headline number sitting around minus 26 million, and everyone online laughing about how they are stuck. Inside the building, it does not feel like panic. It feels like a puzzle they have solved before and plan to solve again, while Tyler Shuck is still on his rookie deal. Restructures, small extensions, smart cuts, spreading money into future years, all of that is on the table. And the goal is simple: protect the core. Clear enough space for a few targeted additions and never waste the window where your quarterback is playing above his price. It is not pretty on paper, but it is controlled chaos. And that is why this cap situation is more illusion than cage. The real tension sits with the veterans who built this identity and still have gas in the tank. Legends like Cam Jordan and Demario Davis have already talked about wanting to keep playing. And you can easily imagine one-year contracts packed with incentives that respect what they have done while keeping flexibility for the front office. Then there is Taysom Hill, the one of one weapon who costs real money but also changes how defenses line up every time he steps on the field, and his future becomes a pure value question. Can you justify that number when you also want to lock in pieces like Eric McCoy and others around the line? None of this is about throwing older players out. It is about flipping every stone until you find a mix where leadership stays in the room, the defense keeps its teeth, and the books still leave you breathing room for the next move. What makes all of this dangerous for the rest of the NFC is how clear the plan becomes once you follow the money. If they clean up the cap without losing the spine of this defense, if they keep their leaders on smart deals, if they ride the savings from Tyler Shuck playing at a high level on a rookie contract, then every free dollar can be pointed straight at giving him better help. That is where the story tilts from survival to attack, because once the cap fog clears, you still have draft capital at the top of the board, including that premium pick in the top 10, and a long offseason to decide which new star should be dropped next to this quarterback, which is exactly where the focus turns next when you look at how they can reload the offense through the draft and targeted additions. The funny part about where the New Orleans Saints are right now is that they do not need to blow everything up on offense. They need to aim better. Up front, they already have bookends that most rebuilding teams dream about, with Kelvin Banks on the left side and a young right tackle holding his own against serious pass rushers. Which means the real mission is to fix the inside and give Tyler Shuck a clean pocket instead of constant traffic in his face. That does not sound flashy, but when you use early picks or smart money on a real left guard and stronger depth in the middle, you turn random third and long scrambles into routine third and medium completions. And that is how an offense grows from interesting to ruthless without changing its entire personality. The front office knows this, and it changes the draft board from best athlete on the board to best help for the quarterback. Behind that line, the choices get even more complicated. And that is where the 8th overall pick becomes a pressure point. In the backfield, you still have the vision and patience of Alvin Kamara, the talent but frustrating availability of Kendre Miller, the fresh legs and straight line burst from rookie back Devin Neal, and the downhill power of Audric Estem, which makes you ask a hard question. Do you invest a rare top 10 pick in a prospect like Jeremiah Love, or trust this room and spend that capital on a different position? At wide receiver, Chris Olave looks like a long-term centerpiece heading into the final year of his deal. Devon Vele flashed the kind of timing and toughness that fits perfectly with Tyler Shuck. And then the rest of the group is a mix of promising pieces and question marks that could either explode or fade. That is why names like Carnell Tate will hang around every Saints mock draft, because one new premium target on the outside turns this passing game from brave to terrifying. And that is exactly what defensive coordinators fear when they flip on the tape. All of this funnels into one choice on draft night that will tell you everything about how the Saints see themselves. If the defense stays mostly intact and the staff believes in the core of this roster, it becomes very easy to use that 8th pick on a star who lives in the huddle with Tyler Shuck, whether that is a mauler in the middle, a do-it-all back, or a wideout who wins even when he looks covered. You add that kind of piece to an offense that already proved it can fight with limited talent, and suddenly, those close games tilt even faster in New Orleans' favor. And when you realize the league has already circled this team for a showcase game on the other side of the world, in front of a new crowd and a massive stage, it starts to feel less like a rebuild and more like a rollout, which is why the next part of this story moves from draft rooms to Paris and what that international spotlight really says about how dangerous the Saints have become. The New Orleans Saints are not just on the schedule next year, they are on display, and that is a very different thing. The league did not randomly ship them overseas. It chose this group to walk into Stade de France, in front of a packed crowd in Paris, and introduce a new wave of fans to American football. That stage tells you what the league really thinks about this team, about Tyler Shuck, about a defense that punishes mistakes, and about a fan base that travels and brings energy. You do not hand a soft story to a new market. You send a team that can play with personality, win with drama, and make people who have never watched a full game stop and care. When you look back at their history away from home, you see why they got this call. The Saints have already built a little international footprint, winning in London, playing tight games that came down to late field goals, and leaving crowds buzzing, even when the final score hurt. Now the league is giving them something fresh, a first ever regular season game in France, most likely in that sweet spot of the schedule where the weather still helps and the stakes are starting to rise. There is talk of a matchup with a tough opponent like the Cleveland Browns, a bruising team that would create real contact and real storylines, not a throwaway game for tourists. That kind of pairing feels like a quiet message from the league office. This is a franchise we trust to represent the product when the world is watching. For the Saints themselves, this is more than a passport stamp. It is a chance to show the world what the next version of this team looks like with Tyler Shuck settled in, Chris Olave in his prime, and that defense prowling on a different continent. Imagine the clip that travels online if the first taste fans in Paris get is a late strike down the sideline, or a strip sack that flips the game, and how that changes the way people talk about New Orleans when they come back to the States. And the wild part is this: the international spotlight is only one sign of how much respect they are starting to earn. Behind the scenes, other franchises are already circling their coaches, and a playmaker like Rashid Shaheed is out there dropping hints about how he feels about New Orleans, which is where this story really starts to get dangerous for the rest of the league. Other teams are already trying to poach Saints coaches, which shows the staff around Tyler Shuck is seen as a real asset, not something tied to a random losing season. Even if a few assistants leave, the defensive core, with leaders like Cam Jordan and Demario Davis, the fit around Tyler Shuck, and the unique threat of Taysom Hill keep the identity intact. If Rashid Shaheed ever returns after gaining big game experience in Seattle, the Saints could turn that one trade into extra picks. A proven playmaker back with Chris Olave and more help for their rookie quarterback, leaving the rest of the league wondering how they allowed New Orleans to reach this spot so quietly.